Imani had always believed love was supposed to feel like certainty. Not perfect, not easy, but certain. For almost 2 years Kelvin had been that certainty in her life, or at least, that's what she thought. They met the way most modern love stories begin, through a screen. At first it was harmless. Late-night messages that turned into morning conversations. Voice notes that made her laugh when she was supposed to be stressed about work. Video calls that never lasted too long, always ending with him saying he had to rush somewhere. But he always came back. Always. And that, to Imani, meant something. They had tried to meet more than once. There was always a reason it didn't happen. His work, her visa delays, family emergencies. Flights that got postponed. It became normal. So normal that Imani stopped questioning it. Instead, she built a relationship around distance and called it love. The first time Kelvin came to her country, Imani thought everything was finally real. He stayed for a short visit. He was charming in person even more than online. He held her hand like he had always belonged there. He laughed like someone who had no secrets. When he left, he told her, "It wouldn't be long before we see each other again properly." This time he promised it would be different. But then came the visa problems. Rejected, rejected again, and again, until the solution was whispered between desperation and hope. Marriage, not a rushed romance, just paperwork, they said. Just something to help them be together faster. Imani hesitated at first, but Kelvin sounded so sure, so calm, so certain, and she trusted that certainty again. She signed the papers. They got married quietly, with promises that the real wedding would come later, something beautiful, something proper, something they would laugh about one day. Then Imani began preparing to leave. Her whole life started shrinking into boxes. She sold her house, some furniture, even small things she once thought she would keep forever. She told herself it made sense. The country she was going to was expensive, and this was not an escape, it was a beginning. A new life with him. The day she left, she didn't cry much. Not because she wasn't emotional, but because everything felt like it was finally aligning. Her bags were heavy, her heart was heavier. But she kept repeating the same thought in her mind. I'm going home to him now. Because she believed in her heart and trust she had for Kelvin. And when she landed in his country, she expected noise, excitement, relief, maybe even his face waiting somewhere near arrivals, scanning the crowd for her. Instead, his phone was off, unreachable. Imani stood still in the middle of the airport crowd, people moving around her like she was invisible. She tried again, and again. Voicemail, voicemail. Then nothing. Imani told herself it's nothing. Phones die, networks fail, people get delayed. It didn't mean anything. She moved closer to the seating area near arrivals and tried again. Kelvin. Call, voicemail, Kelvin. Call, voicemail. Her fingers tightened around the phone a little harder each time. Like pressure alone could force it to ring into existence, but it didn't. A voice came over the intercom announcing flight updates she wasn't listening to. Somewhere nearby, a child was crying. Someone was laughing too loudly, like they didn't understand how fragile her world felt in that moment. She checked her bag again. Passport, documents, marriage certificate, printed copies of flight details. Everything was there, everything except him. After a while, a uniformed officer approached her. "Ma'am." Imani looked up quickly, forcing a polite smile that didn't fully land. "Yes? Are you being picked up?" "Yes," she said immediately. "My husband." That word still felt new on her tongue. The officer nodded slowly. "Can we have his contact details?" Imani handed over her phone without thinking too deeply. Kelvin's number, his email, everything she had memorized without ever needing to question why. The officer stepped aside. Imani watched him dial once, twice, then stop. He tried again, same result, no answer. Something in the officer's expression changed, not alarm exactly, but attention sharpening. "Please wait here," he said, and then he walked away with her phone. That was the first moment Imani felt it. A small, uncomfortable shift, like the floor beneath her had tilted slightly without warning. Minutes passed, then more. Her suitcase felt heavier the longer she sat there. She started noticing things she hadn't before. People being escorted through different gates, officers speaking in low voices, someone being pulled into a secondary room with documents in hand. Imani's name was eventually called. Imani Juma. She stood up too quickly. Yes. Please come with us. The room they took her into was not dramatic. That was the worst part. It looked like an office. Plain walls, a desk, 2 chairs. An officer placed her documents on the table. We are just doing a standard verification, he said. Imani nodded, still trying to stay calm. Then came the question that didn't feel standard at all. Are you aware that Mr. Kelvin Joan is still legally married? For a second, Imani didn't process the words. They didn't connect properly in her mind. Still married. Legally married. Her brain tried to rearrange it into something softer. Maybe they meant divorced but not updated. Maybe paperwork delay. Maybe... No, she said finally, quietly. That's not possible. The officer didn't react emotionally, just slid a document closer to her. It appears his divorce has not been finalized. The room went too quiet after that. Even the air felt still. Imani stared at the paper without reading it properly at first. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. I spoke to him, he said. Her voice stopped. Because suddenly she couldn't finish the sentence without hearing how uncertain it sounded, and that's when the officer added something else. We've been trying to reach him. No response yet. Imani sat back slowly, not because she wanted to, because her body didn't know what else to do with itself. Kelvin's phone rang again, and again, and again, until it finally connected. Imani was still in the small office when the officer turned the speaker on. At first there was only noise on the line, faint movement. A breath. Then silence, like someone deciding whether to speak. Then Kelvin's voice came through. Hello. It sounded tired. Not the voice Imani expected from someone who was supposed to be waiting for her. The officer leaned forward slightly. Mr. Jones. Imani knew the voice because she had spent 2 years hearing it. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. We are currently holding your wife at immigration. She has arrived in the country. Silence. Then Kelvin, sharper now, my wife? Imani's head lifted instantly. Kelvin, she said before she could stop herself. There was a small shift on the line, a breath caught. Imani. Just her name, that alone should have felt comforting. It didn't. Kelvin, where are you? She asked quickly. I've been calling you, your phone. I know, he interrupted, voice tight. I know, I'm sorry. There's been complications. Imani's chest tightened. Complications like what? I'm at immigration, they're saying. The officer raised a hand slightly, asking her to stay calm. But she couldn't. Before she could finish, Kelvin spoke again, this time shifting his attention away from her panic and directly toward the officer. Sir, Kelvin said, voice now more controlled. Is it possible I can arrange a place for my wife to stay while I sort out my divorce proceedings? Imani froze. The word stay didn't feel real. Like she was no longer a person arriving in love, just someone needing accommodation. The officer leaned slightly toward the phone. Are you referring to temporary accommodation within the country? Yes, Kelvin replied immediately. I can pay for it. I just need her somewhere safe until I resolve this situation. A pause. Imani's eyes flicked between the officer and the phone like she was trying to understand which version of reality was real. Safe. He said safe. But nothing about this felt safe. The officer didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Imani's documents again, then spoke carefully. Mr. Matthews, at this stage, your wife's entry is under review due to inconsistencies in marital status documentation. Kelvin exhaled sharply on the other end. I understand. I'll handle the divorce. I need her out of the airport process. This is not her fault. Imani's chest tightened at that. This is not her fault. Then whose was it? A second officer stepped into the room quietly, holding a file. He whispered something to the first officer too low for Imani to hear. The first officer nodded once, then spoke again into the call. Mr. Matthews, we may allow temporary accommodation only under strict supervision, pending further verification of your marital status and legal standing. Kelvin didn't hesitate. Anything. I'll do anything. A pause. Then softer, almost relieved. Thank you. Imani finally found her voice again. Kelvin, she said quietly, what is going on? There was silence on the line for a moment. When he answered, his voice had changed. Not calmer. Heavier. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I swear I was. I just didn't think it would reach this point." Imani blinked slowly. "That doesn't answer my question." Another pause. And then, like the truth was sitting somewhere between fear and confession, he added, "I need you to trust me for a little longer." The officer lowered the speaker slightly, preparing to end the call. But Imani didn't move. She just sat there, staring at nothing, realizing something she didn't want to accept yet. She hadn't arrived in his life. She had arrived in the middle of it. And no one had prepared her for what was already waiting there. The word temporary followed Imani like a shadow she couldn't shake. She repeated it in her head as they guided her out of the small office. Temporary accommodation. Temporary holding. Temporary waiting. But nothing about the feeling in her chest felt temporary. Her suitcase rolled behind her down a corridor that suddenly felt too long. The airport noise was still there somewhere, announcements, footsteps, distant voices, but it was muted now, like she had been pulled slightly out of the world she arrived in. An officer walked ahead, another followed behind. Not aggressive, not unkind, but firm enough to remind her she didn't really have a choice in where she was going. They didn't take her far. Just through another set of doors. Then down a quieter passage. Then into a vehicle waiting outside a restricted exit. No windows she could clearly see through, just reflections of herself faintly in the glass. Tired eyes. Stiff shoulders. A face that didn't fully recognize what was happening yet. No one spoke during the drive. And that silence was worse than questions. Imani kept thinking about Kelvin's voice. "I was going to tell you." As if timing made betrayal softer. As if truth delayed was still honesty. When they arrived, the building didn't look like what she expected. Not a detention center. Not a hotel either. Something in between. Neutral colors, controlled entrances. Cameras in corners that didn't bother pretending to be hidden. A place designed for waiting without questions. Inside, an officer checked her documents again. Then handed them back. "Your stay here is temporary," he said calmly. "You are not under arrest." Imani nodded slowly. The words "not under arrest" should have comforted her. They didn't. Because she understood something else now. You don't have to be arrested to be stuck. They led her down a hallway with numbered doors. No personal touches, no warmth, just structure. Finally they stopped at one. Room 14. The officer opened it. "Here you are." Imani stepped inside slowly. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The room was small. A bed. A chair. A desk bolted to the floor. Imani sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress didn't sink much. It was firm. Unforgiving. Like the place was built to remind her not to get comfortable. Her mind replayed everything in fragments now. His voice saying "my wife" like it surprised him. The officer's calm tone. Kelvin asking for her to be somewhere safe. Safe. She almost laughed at that. But nothing came out. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ma'am," a voice from outside said. "Dinner will be provided shortly. Please remain in your room for now, while verification continues." Verification, she repeated quietly, under her breath. The word was starting to feel endless. Footsteps faded away again. Silence returned. Imani finally lay back on the bed, still fully dressed. Her eyes stayed open for a long time, far beyond this room. Kelvin was still trying to fix something that had already started breaking her. Kelvin didn't even hear her enter at first. The house was too quiet. He was sitting in the lounge, phone still in his hand, scrolling through messages that were either unanswered or ignored. Then he heard heels, slow, unbothered. Familiar in the worst way. Linda walked in like she still owned the space. Not just the house, the air inside it. Her eyes scanned the room briefly before landing on him. And she smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. Smugly. "I see you arranged accommodation for your new toy." Kelvin's jaw tightened immediately. He didn't look up at first. Then slowly he did. "Don't call her that." Linda tilted her head, slightly amused. "Oh," she said softly. "So she's upgraded already?" Kelvin stood up now. His voice dropped. "Don't refer to my wife like that." That word landed between them heavier than anything else in the room. Wife. Linda's smile didn't disappear, it widened, as if he had just confirmed something she already knew. Your wife, she repeated slowly, tasting it. Interesting choice of title. Considering you're still legally tied to me. Kelvin exhaled sharply. This is exactly why I didn't tell you everything. Because you turn everything into control. Linda walked closer now, calm with every step. Control wasn't something she chased. It was something she assumed. I don't turn things into control. She corrected. I respond to disrespect. She stopped a few steps away from him. Her voice softened again, almost conversational. You brought another woman into this situation before closing what you already had. Kelvin shook his head. That's not what this is. Linda let out a quiet laugh. A small one. Almost disappointed. Oh, Kelvin, she said. It always becomes not what it is when you get caught. She moved past him slightly, glancing around the lounge like she was assessing something that belonged to her. Then she spoke again, casually. You know what you have to do to be with your new toy. Kelvin turned sharply. Stop calling her that. Linda ignored him completely. Do what I want, she continued, voice steady. And I'll make the divorce proceedings faster. A pause. Then she finally looked at him properly, eyes calm. Certain, I can drag this out for years, Kelvin, or I can end it in weeks. She smiled again, smaller this time. It depends on how cooperative you decide to be. Kelvin's voice dropped, controlled but strained. This is blackmail. Linda shrugged lightly. I prefer negotiation. Silence settled between them, heavy, unavoidable. Then she added, almost gently, you can have your new life, or you can keep fighting me and watch it fall apart before it even starts. A beat. And right now, she said, turning slightly toward the hallway, she's sitting in a foreign country depending on your decisions. That last line landed differently. Not loud. Kelvin didn't answer immediately, because for the first time since Imani landed, he realized Linda wasn't just threatening him. She already had leverage, and Imani was already inside it. The silence after Linda's words didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, like something had moved into it and decided to stay. Kelvin stood in the middle of the lounge long after she had walked out. His phone still in his hand, screen dimming between unanswered messages. His chest felt tight, not from fear exactly, but from pressure, the kind that builds when too many decisions arrive at once and none of them are clean. He finally moved, not toward Linda, away from everything. He stepped outside onto the balcony and shut the glass door behind him. The night air didn't calm him the way he expected. It just made everything clearer, too clear. Imani was in a holding facility. Linda was inside his life again, but now with sharper edges. And somewhere in between, he had placed Imani in the middle of a war she never agreed to. He unlocked his phone and scrolled. Then called his friend. It rang twice. Then a familiar voice answered. Kelvin? Kelvin didn't waste time. I need you to listen to me. His friend paused immediately. What happened? Kelvin exhaled, running a hand over his face. She's here, Imani. She landed today. A beat of silence. Then, okay, his friend said slowly. That's good, right? Kelvin shook his head even though the friend couldn't see him. It's not that simple. And then he explained it. Not everything, but enough. The marriage. The unresolved divorce. Linda. The airport. The accommodation arrangement. The pressure. The control. By the time he finished, his voice had dropped lower, like he was speaking from somewhere underneath himself. There was a long silence on the other end. Then his friend spoke, but not the way Kelvin expected. Why are you telling me this? He said carefully. And not your wife Imani. Kelvin closed his eyes. The question hit harder than Linda's threats. His friend continued, voice firmer now. This is not something you fix around her. This is something you sit down and explain to her. A pause. Kelvin, she left her life for you. Kelvin's grip tightened on the phone. I was going to tell her, he said quickly. But even as he said it, it sounded weaker than he wanted. His friend didn't let him escape into it. No, he replied. You were going to tell her after everything calmed down. After you solved it, after it became convenient. Silence. Kelvin looked out into the dark. The city below kept moving like nothing had changed. like no one's life was collapsing in layers. His friend's voice softened slightly. Right now, she's in another country. Alone, dealing with immigration, not knowing what's going on. And somewhere far from him, Imani was still sitting in a room designed for waiting, completely unaware that the next conversation about her life was already being arranged without her knowledge. The knock came earlier than Imani expected. She was still sitting on the bed, shoes off but not fully relaxed, like her body didn't trust the idea of resting here. The door opened slightly. "Ma'am," a voice said, calm and practiced. "You have been granted a supervised private call." Imani blinked. "A call?" "Yes. Your husband has requested direct communication." The words "your husband" made her stomach tighten. She stood slowly. "Now?" she asked. "Yes, you will be escorted shortly." Imani didn't even realize she was holding her breath until she let it out. A call. Finally, something solid in all of this floating uncertainty. They led her down the same controlled hallway again. Same lighting, same silence, same feeling that nothing here was designed for comfort, only function. She tried not to think too far ahead. If she thought too far ahead, she would start asking questions she wasn't ready for. The room they brought her into was different from the first one. Smaller, cleaner, more intentional. A single chair, a table, a phone already placed in the center like it had been waiting for her. An officer stood near the door, not close enough to interfere, but close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. "Your call will be monitored for safety and verification purposes," the officer said. Imani nodded slowly. "Okay." Her voice sounded calmer than she felt. She sat down. Her hands rested on the table but didn't fully relax. For a moment, she just stared at the phone. It looked ordinary. That was the strange part. Something that could carry everything she had been waiting for looking so normal. The line clicked. A faint sound of connection. Then static. Then, "Imani?" His voice. "Kelvin." Her chest tightened immediately. "Kelvin," she said quickly, almost instinctively. "What is going on? I'm at this place, they told me." "I know," he interrupted softly. Too softly. Like he had been preparing how to sound instead of what to say. "I know where you are." "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm trying to fix this," he replied quickly. "That's not what I asked." A beat. "I'm not far," he said finally. Not an answer, but not a lie either. Imani looked down at her hands. She could feel it now. The shift. The thing she didn't want to name yet. "You didn't tell me you were still married," she said quietly. Kelvin didn't respond immediately, and that silence was enough. "I was going to," he started. Imani cut in immediately. "No," she said, voice firmer now. "Don't say that again." Silence. Then Kelvin spoke again, slower. "I'm trying to get you out of there." Imani blinked. "Out of where?" "The accommodation," he said. "I don't like you being there alone." Imani let out a small disbelieving breath. "I didn't choose to be here." Then he added something carefully. "I have someone who can help us talk properly, without all these restrictions." Imani frowned. "Someone?" "Yes," he said, "a way for us to speak directly, no interruptions." Imani's grip on the edge of the table tightened slightly. Something about that didn't sit right. Not dangerous, just unclear. "And what does that mean?" she asked slowly. Kelvin hesitated. "It means I can explain everything properly." A long silence stretched between them. Imani looked around the room. The officer near the door. The phone, the sterile walls. And then back at the voice of the man she crossed countries for. "Kelvin," she said quietly, "I didn't come here for explanations. I came here because I trusted you.